sort of start, I wanted to just talk about what I call, it's an elephant in the room. We're all talking about the letters that we're expecting from the minister and also the final specifications. As your peak body, we have been shouting loud and clear that that's an important information that this sector needs. And we are waiting. So over the last 2 weeks, I've actually managed to get in front of the minister twice to inform her that we really need to hear so we can get on with getting our contracts sorted ready for the new contracts in January. And Anthony Shannon is here today. And I also ring Anthony every week and ask him if we've heard anything. So Anthony, it would be remiss of me not to check in with you whilst you're here to see if we have any more news about the specifications and the letters that were going out to the sector.
Thanks, Susan, and yeah, thanks for the opportunity, everybody, to attend again and talk to you about Program Logics. Look, I can confirm that FAMS has been particularly diligent in pursuing us here at DCJ around the recommissioning decision, so that I can confirm. Also, too, I can let you know we are hoping to be able to communicate the outcomes of the recommissioning decisions to the sector by the end of this week. We're just waiting on some final sign-offs on that communication, but we're hoping to be able to do that by the end of this week. And I know everybody's waiting and keen to hear that information, so we're hoping that'll happen this week.
Thanks, Anthony. And that's tomorrow. So we will all be anxiously awaiting and look forward to hearing from you about the next steps for us going forward. But back to the agenda for today, I would like to hand over to Corinne from DCJ, who is going to talk through the program logics and make it very easy for us all to complete them. Thanks, Corinne. No pressure.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Yes, as Susan says, my name's Corinne, or Corinne Beasley. I work as a Senior Policy Officer in the Evidence and Strategy team. I'm also joined today by my colleague, Amanda Jones, if you want to wave and say hi, Amanda. And of course, you've just heard from Anthony, obviously our director. So as you can see here, we've got up the first slide, and you may see our new program name on this slide, Community and Family Support, or CFS, which is obviously going to be effective from the 1st of January 2026. And the final version of the specifications will have the new name, the Community and Family Support Program specifications. And until then, you're going to continue to use the TI and FCS program specifications. So today we're going to go over, as Susan's mentioned, the program logics for the CFS program, how we've embedded evidence into the program logics, and all the resources that we have available to support you. And then later, Amanda will talk to you about our approach to parenting programs and supported playgroups. Next slide, please. Just waiting for our next slide. Thank you, Amanda. So, of course, I would also thank you very much, Susan, for your beautiful acknowledgement this morning. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians and owners of the lands on which we're meeting today. So I'm also joining from the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I would like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and extend that same deep respect to Aboriginal people who are here today. The land that we all join on from today, wherever that may be, is land that was always and always will be Aboriginal land. Next slide. So here you'll see just some of the key messages that we really want to communicate with you today. So yeah, there's just a few things that we're going to cover, but these are sort of the main messages. So the first thing is that as service providers, your program logic should match your contract and also what data you're collecting. And we're also asking that program logics under the CFS program should be finalised by the 1st of June of 2026. So that hopefully should give you some time. The second thing is that there are 5 high-level program logics in the CFS program, but you don't need to develop 5 of them. You might need to complete more than one of them, depending on what program activity you're funded to deliver and who you're delivering services to. And we've also got a cultural safety and wellbeing program logic, and that supports you to deliver culturally safe services. But just to be clear, you don't need to develop an individual program logic for cultural safety. And as I mentioned earlier, we've got also some resources to help you, such as our wonderful e-learning module, which hopefully you've all had a chance to have a look at. And we've also got pre-filled program logic templates and data which will help you complete your current situation column. We also have evidence from our commissioned evidence reviews, which include core components. And these now have gone into our program logics and the templates, and that will help you in completing your program logic. And the last thing up here is just in regards to the current TEI program, and we've been getting a lot of questions about this. We just wanted to point out that at this stage, there's no requirement for you to complete your annual review of your program logic. As you all know, it's best practice, and under your contracts, you have to complete an annual program logic review. But given where we are in the recommissioning cycle, we can pause the annual program logic reviews until after the new CFS contracts are in place. Next slide, please. So most of you will already be really familiar with program logics, but just to recap, essentially a program logic is a tool that's used to design or explain a service or a program or intervention that intends to improve outcomes. It explains what a service is, how it works, and it shows the link between client needs, evidence, services, outputs, and outcomes. So a program logic is a key document, and that's why we've got it up on the top here of the slide. It tells the story of your service, and it sits alongside the contract and the data being collected through your reporting. It helps us to track progress and also helps us to ensure what is being delivered is contributing to client outcomes. So the contract, the program logic, and what you're reporting should all be aligned and consistent. So we know that in many organisations, there are multiple people doing different tasks. So some people responsible for ensuring data is collected and reported might not be the people delivering the service or the people who are actually overseeing the contract. But it's really important that these different roles have an awareness of each of these interconnected pieces and documents, and that everyone's working together. So this will ensure we have consistency across these foundations of the program. So next slide. Why are we asking providers to complete the program logic and keep it up to date? Well, in the CFS program, service providers have to complete their own individual program logic to show how your services or activities contribute to client and community outcomes. And as I said, it's part of your contract that you need to do this. It really helps providers link what they're doing with why we're doing it. It's like a roadmap that connects your activities to your goals. And program logics also reflect changing needs and priorities within the local context. And any service activities that you outline in your program logic should change to mirror these local needs and priorities. And that's why we ask everyone to review them on an annual basis, because obviously things change. And also the program logic helps monitor and evaluate the service delivery against the outcomes you're trying to achieve. Next slide, please. So the new program logic templates we have will become mandatory under the new CFS program. So the earlier that you as providers engage in this process, the better. So it's good that you're all here today. It's not mandatory to have completed the new program logic template for the contract negotiation for the CFS program. However, it is a useful tool to complete as part of the contract negotiations, as it helps parties to talk about what needs to be delivered and why, and how you're going to achieve the proposed outcomes. And as I mentioned, your providers will have, CFS providers will have until the 1st of June to complete their new program logics. Next slide. So the CFS program specifications include 5 high-level or program-level program logics. So as I talked about earlier, we've got the cultural safety and wellbeing, but you're not required to develop an individual cultural safety and wellbeing program logic. We've got the community strengthening program logic, the family connect and support, and again, service providers don't need to complete an individual program logic for this particular program activity. We've got the wellbeing and safety children and families program logic, and that's obviously for service providers providing services to children and families. And we've also got the wellbeing and safety young people, and that's for providers who are specifically providing services targeted at young people. All these program logics were developed from commissioned evidence reviews in line with our objective to build an evidence-informed approach to the program. And as you'll see here on the slide, we've highlighted the 2 program logics which include core components: the Wellbeing and Safety Program Activity Children and Family program logic, and this includes the Preventing Child Maltreatment Evidence Review core components, and the Wellbeing and Safety Program Activity Young People, which includes the Youth Socio-Emotional Wellbeing Evidence Review core components. These core components are where we have the strongest evidence of what works. Next slide. So as I mentioned, there's 2 program-wide program logics which have core components. And these program logics are based on the evidence reviews that have the strongest evidence. And because of the strength of the evidence, they identified core components. So on this slide, we're just spending a bit of time talking about the Preventing Child Maltreatment core components. And there are a couple of reasons why we want to focus on these. So preventing child maltreatment is at the heart of the CFS program, building safety and protective factors in individuals and families and reducing risk and avoiding contact with the statutory system. So all CFS services are working towards this in some way. So in the specifications, we specifically call out these core components and describe how they would be delivered in the CFS program. And as you can see up on this slide, we've mapped all these core components to service types. So the aim here is wherever possible, children and families who require support from CFS services in the Wellbeing and Safety Program activity should be able to access services that include all 5 of the core components. And we know this is already happening because we know these matching service types are being delivered around the state. So for example, if a provider is contracted to deliver parenting programs, they're delivering engagement, parental education, coaching and modelling, and building supportive relationships and social networks, which are 3 of the core, or 4 of the core components. So a few things to note here. We want children and families to have access to these core components, but not all core components need to be offered by the one CFS service provider. If there is a core component that a CFS service provider does not deliver as part of their contract, they can refer onto or partner with another service who's already delivering that core component within the LGA. The other thing to note is that the service provider, the other service provider who's been referred to, they don't have to be a CFS service. They could be any early intervention service who's part of the broader early intervention network, such as health, or they may receive Commonwealth funding or be another DCJ funded program. These core components and how they're delivered, so including through partnerships and referral pathways, should be reflected in the program logic. And we know and appreciate that service providers will not always be able to deliver or even refer clients to services where they're able to access all 5 of the core components. So we just want to emphasise that service providers should not be concerned that they will be penalised if they're unable to deliver all 5 core components, or if they're unable to refer clients to other service providers for delivery of these additional core components. And we know that there are circumstances, for example, where services are being offered in a regional community and there may be a thin market and no one to refer the client to. Or a service might be operating somewhere where there are other services, but their capacity of these other providers might be limited and they may not be able to accept a referral. But the main point is that service providers should be trying to do this where possible, and we understand that it may not always be possible. So in this case, we just recommend that service providers have kind of frank conversations with their CPOs just to see if they can be offered any support to connect to their clients with other services, if there are any available. So in terms of when you're completing your program logic, you should try to name, where possible, who you're partnering with or referring to, if that's available to you, or if not, talking to your CPOs to get some suggestions or help in understanding what other providers might be available in the area to assist in delivering that core component. So this table that you see here on the slide in the program specifications, this table's there in Appendix E, which has got all the core components and how they map up to service types. So this will make it easy to see which core component is being delivered through the different service types. Next slide, please. So here I just thought I'd take you and you're probably already aware of these things, but just to step out a little bit, all the elements of the program logic. So there's 6 elements. So no doubt most of you will already be familiar with this, but just to go through it very quickly, the first part of the program logic is the current situation. And that's where you have to clearly define the need your service is attempting to meet. So, for example, you'd be answering questions here like, well, why have we got this service? What's its purpose? And what is the need that it's meeting? And in this column, it's really important to be as specific as possible, making sure you describe the population group or cohort you're working with, their needs or common risk factors, and the delivery setting. And here we are asking you to include evidence which is based on local population or client level data. And on our website, we've got a section called Understanding Your Local Area, and you can find there some useful data sources that will help you with this. So now I'm going to jump to the number 6, which is because this would be the next thing you would do is identify your outcomes. And these should match what you're contracted to deliver. And you can also look at the outcomes in the program level program logic under your program activity. So the focus here is what needs to be resolved as identified in your current situation as a result of your service. And then the second column is the evidence. This is where you summarise the evidence on the most effective programs or program components to change the problems that you've identified and to achieve the outcomes you're hoping to get. And the good news is that this has already been completed for you because we have the evidence from the commissioned evidence reviews. And yeah, that's already populated in the template. So it's when you're seeking to improve client outcomes, it's important that you use high quality evidence to inform your program design and implementation and decision making, so that you make sure that your client needs are being addressed as effectively as possible. And then the third column is your activities and services. And this is where you describe your activities or contract deliverables that you're undertaking to achieve your intended outcomes. And this is based on what the evidence says is the most effective way to change the identified problems, which for our program is the core components or critical elements from our evidence reviews. And then column 4 is the outputs. So this describes the tangible results, activities or products. The focus here is usually what's delivered by the service, things that can be counted or seen, such as number of people who've received support or participated in a service component. So in our templates, we're saying that this is an optional column because they're included in your contract, so you don't need to add them in here. But we've had some feedback that some people like to have their program outputs in here so that they're all in one place. And the next thing is the theory of change. It seems to us be a sticking point for a lot of people, but essentially this section is where you're articulating together the research evidence and the mechanisms of change. So that is why the proposed service activities in all the core components or critical elements would be expected to achieve the proposed outcomes. So a clearly described mechanism of change supports your ability to empirically test whether the service will have a positive impact on client outcomes and whether this impact can be attributed to the service rather than, for example, to other factors. So those are all the elements of a program logic. And once you've completed all the columns, it's a really good idea to review the program logic as a whole, check that it's clear, comprehensive, and that all the connections between the columns are logical. So an effective program logic model should be logical, clearly explain how the service activities contribute to the client outcomes, and the links between the evidence, service activities, and outcomes make sense. Next slide, please. So we've mentioned a few times the simplified individual program logic templates that we now have up on our website that service providers can use to complete their own program logic. And here's an example up on screen of the community strengthening one. And they all have instructions on how to complete them. So if we have a quick look here, the red text is the detailed instructions on how to complete each column. And so as you can see from the current situation column, there are guiding questions to help elicit the information that you need to complete it. We also have, as I mentioned, the data you can rely on in the understanding your local area part of our website, where you can use that to put information in here. And then the next column, you'll see the evidence column, it's been completed. It's come from our commissioned evidence reviews. And if you want, you can add additional evidence here if you want, but it's optional. You don't actually have to go and look at the evidence reviews directly to put the information here, because we've extracted all the pertinent information and put them in the program logic to make this easier. But of course, if you do want to have a look at the evidence reviews, if you're interested in the greater context, then you can go to our evidence portal to get more detail. So then the next column, the activities and services. The service types that are relevant to the program activity, in this case, community strengthening, appear in a list. So all you have to do is tick the box next to the service type that you're contracted to deliver. The instructions in red also prompt you to provide some narrative around how your service will deliver these services in line with the evidence. And then in the client outcomes column, you just need to identify the outcomes you expect your clients to achieve at the end of service delivery. And the outcomes column has the relevant client outcomes from the CFS client outcomes. So providers can just simply delete the outcomes that they're not contracted to deliver. And then we recommend completing the theory of change as the last step. This brings all the elements of your program logic, as I mentioned earlier, into a clear and logical statement. When completing this column, you should describe how and why your service is expected to achieve the outcomes while referencing the relevant evidence. So for community strengthening program logic, you should refer to the critical elements, and for the wellbeing and safety, refer to the core components and just describe how your activities address these. And if you need more guidance on this, the template and the program logic level program logic theory of change have provided some wording and guidance on how to do this. And so all the information on program logics, including all the new templates, as well as the link to the e-module, can be found on our key TI program resources webpage. And there's a drop-down menu with all our program logic resources. And again, you can see here what I mentioned earlier, which was the understanding your local area, which provides access to data sources when you're completing your current situation column. And the Program Logic e-module is the main way we're rolling out the information and training on Program Logics within the program. So hopefully you've all had a chance to have a look at this. It tells you pretty much everything you need to know about our evidence-informed approach and a step-by-step guide to completing your individual Program Logic templates. There's a lot of information in the e-module, but the course itself is broken down into 5 separate sections. So you can access them individually, as in when you need to, or according to what program activity you're delivering. The first part has an explanation of what a program logic is, the evidence-informed approach to the program, as well as an overview of the core components and why we're using them. And it's got a great video where you might recognise a few characters in from our sector. That explains core components. There are 3 other sections helping you, providers who are working in this community strengthening and wellbeing and safety program activities to complete their program logic templates. And then the last section has a quiz, as well as information on where to go for more support. Just bear in mind, if you're doing the e-module, we are doing updates. In particular, we are looking at trying to get some more content in there regarding the cultural safety and wellbeing program logic requirements. Next slide. So, oh, what's happened? We got the slide up? There we go. The evidence portal. So, as I mentioned earlier, all our evidence that we've extracted from our commissioned evidence reviews, and they're all in our evidence columns for the program logics. And this will hopefully make the process easier and more streamlined. But if you're interested in deep diving into the evidence, we encourage you to go to our evidence portal to access our evidence reviews, and you can see the list here of all the evidence reviews we have. You don't need to do this to complete the program logics, but it is available if you want to have a better understanding of the evidence we rely on in the program. And that's it. It's open to questions.
Hi, Corinne. There's a question in the chat just about the length, how much information is appropriate for program logic. Are you expecting a page, 10, so on and so forth? So just wondering if you... Yeah.
We don't have a set guide on how much needs to go in there. I guess it's just follow the direction of the template. There are examples attached to the individual templates, which kind of give a flavour of what we're looking for. So, but it all depends on what you're delivering, how you're delivering it. We don't need reams of information, but obviously we need an explanation brought together in a logical statement and addressing the evidence. But if you, the general guidance is attached to the template, so you'll see there examples of how it might be completed.
And there's a question from Roger about if you provide family capacity building, does that relate to all 5 core components? So just wondering if you could clarify that as well.
On the matrix, I will just, if we bring up the table. Yes, it does, because engagement has all service types. Case management, parental education, coaching, modelling, has got family capacity building, parenting, self-care and personal development, also family capacity building, and the fifth one is building supportive relationships and social networks. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought, but it's always good to double check.
Yeah.
And there's also a bit of a discussion in the chat around how some of the data is drawn from the 2021 census, and just the fact that this might sort of be a bit out of date. Do you just have any thoughts perhaps around just where you could draw data, for example, as well, on top of maybe some of that conversation around census data? Yeah.
The census data, so that would be in the current situation column, and like I said, the information that we have is on the understanding your local area, which points to the local data. So the evidence reviews are separate to the information around the census.
I can just add to that, if that's helpful. You're not restricted to just utilizing the census data. We're happy for providers to use other types of evidence as well, about what they know about their local need. So you can really draw from a plethora of resources. Unfortunately, that is the most up-to-date census, and we do recognize that, they don't do it every year. So we are open to other forms of evidence.
Thank you. No, that's really helpful. I think just for people to hear that, and just that opportunity as well, which I think answers another question that was asked in the chat around sort of autonomy in terms of putting things into program logic. I would assume that the parts that are editable, that there's sort of that degree of discretion around what sort of information you'd like to pull in, and what suits your sort of service type and
That's
your
right.
service
Yeah.
delivery. Yeah.
For example, evidence, we've embedded the evidence from our reviews into that column, but by all means, we are happy for service providers to use other types of evidence that they collect around, like, it could be text data, it could be things that they've heard from their clients. We're really flexible on that. It doesn't need to just be what is in our evidence reviews. We just did that as a tool to help providers so that they don't have to go through the full evidence review.
Having said that, though, the evidence should be specific
Yes.
to the activities and things that you're delivering. So, I mean, in the past, we've had, useful information, but looked at program logics where they'll put very general information about the evidence around early intervention as a whole, but we want it more targeted towards the activities and the outcomes that you're trying to achieve, because obviously the broader evidence we all know about. This is about specific to your local need, but also to the outcomes you're trying to achieve as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Amanda and Corinne. I've just popped a link into the chat for Menti, which we'll be using for the next bit of today's meeting. We're just going to do a little bit of an interactive session with some of you. Perhaps that will sort of be a nice sort of breakup between this presentation and the next one. And for those of you who haven't used Menti before, it's just a case of going to menti.com on any device. Really, it works on a tablet, phone, or a computer, and putting in that code. So some of you are already answering. And really, we're not just asking these questions just for the sake of it. Some of this helps guide sort of future network sessions, some of the content. So sessions like this one sort of come about from these consultations with you as the sector, trying to understand what's really important to you, what your needs are, and that helps us, and in this occasion, partnering with DCJ as well to try and answer some of these questions. So obviously, as some of you are already answering, first question is just sort of understanding how many of you have had the opportunity to access the Program Logic E module. From my understanding right now, it looks like that link isn't quite working, but I believe that just should be work to get that online at some point. Yeah, it's looking like a majority actually of participants today haven't actually had the opportunity to access that module.
That's okay. I mean, a lot of people are very busy at this time, and with other things. But I think it's really helpful in terms of explaining, and it does have a step-by-step guide. So the first section is kind of really the whole approach to evidence. But in terms of you actually going in to complete your program logic, go into those sections on the program activities, and it will just tell you what step by step what you need to put in. So it's really a helpful tool when you're actually going through and having to complete your program logics when you do have to do them. And given the stage we're at, it's not surprising that everyone's had a chance to go in and do that. But given that it will be mandatory next year to have a program logic in place, I would encourage people to go and take a look at least and become familiar. Just bear in mind, though, when you're looking at the e-module that we're going to be updating it. And so there are downloadable program logic templates within the e-module, but the most up-to-date ones are actually on our website where you access the program logic e-module itself. So we're going to be updating the whole e-module, which will then have the new templates or the links to the new templates. But when you're doing the e-module, download the actual templates from the web page. Because they've just been tweaked a little bit and updated.
Yeah, thanks, Corinne. Yeah, and I think we posted that link to the key program resources on the chat as well. So hopefully, yeah, some of you can access that. We're just curious as well, just to explore with some of you who've had the opportunity to, and I recognize not everyone has been able to prioritize this, especially since it hasn't been mandatory yet, but just curious around continuing that conversation that we've actually just had around what else you might use as evidence in your program logics. I think there was an acknowledgement from Corinne and Amanda just around those opportunities that exist as well. Obviously, the evidence portal is there, and that review has been done, and it's freely available to all of you, but whether or not, yeah, just curious what the opportunities are, and perhaps an opportunity for peer learning as well. There's some of your colleagues here who maybe haven't had a chance to really invest in this, whether you'd be willing to share some of the things that have been helpful for those of you who've explored alternative data sources. All right, so we've got quite a few coming in as well. So council results, your own data reports, anecdotal evidence, local government stats, it's around early development census, and yes, ANROS, AIFS, those yeah, research bodies as well, which are very good. Client feedback surveys, community need assessments. Yeah, and for those of you who are maybe grappling a little bit with Menti, if that's not playing nice of you as well, feel free to pop in the chat, or if you feel really, really bold as well, you can always to unmute your mic and speak out loud, speak your truth to the room about your data sources. Yeah, right, homelessness data, CIFA data, yep. So as you can see that there is a lot that you could be drawing on. Again, I think, you know, we've just been through that presentation. There's that acknowledgement of that balance of workloads. It, you know, I'm sure Amanda and Corinne would agree. It's not an expectation that you'd be doing every single one of these sources. That wouldn't be the point of this, but just an illustration, I guess, of what might be available as well, if it's relevant, particularly to the kind of service that you're delivering. It's relevant to your operations and wanting to put together something. Here are some, quite a few actually, alternative sources. RRC's come up, the Australian Child Maltreatment Study, and a lot of comments around DEX data as well as, so yeah, Bosca. Yeah, oh, you're a knowledgeable bunch. I appreciate that. This is a bit of a tricky question, but we're really curious as well for those of you who've looked into developing a theory of change or have done one before. What's been perhaps helpful, or what are some things that along the way helped you sort of better understand how to develop a theory of change, I guess? Or alternatively, if that's something that you've struggled with, what is a practical action or some degree of support that would really help you along this journey of developing a theory of change that could be perhaps provided? Yeah, that's what we're really curious about. I'll give everyone a couple of minutes to type a really, really long answer. Yep, understanding how much to include. I don't know if Corinne and Amanda, either of you want to just quickly comment on word limits and
I guess, yeah, what I said earlier, there isn't really a word limit as to how much you need to put in there. And the templates give guidance. We do ask that you reference the evidence in the theory of change. So if it's like if it's a wellbeing safety program logic, we'd expect you to be addressing the 5 core components in there. Having good examples. Yeah.
Thank you, Corinne. And then another comment around, yeah, having good examples. Yeah, right. So a comment around sort of the conversations with CPOs, and that sort of challenge, and someone's recommended a short workshop. So there is an option at the end of this, or towards the end of this presentation as well, just to scope what some of you would like to discuss in the future sector conversation. One of which is discussing theory of change moving forward. So that's potentially a topic we could explore in more depth moving forward. But I can see examples has come up again as well as something that might be helpful.
We do have an example in the program-wide program logics. So if people haven't had a chance to see those yet, that could be helpful.
Yeah, and also in the individual program logic template. So if you scroll past the template itself, there are examples in there as well, as if someone had completed their own one. So as well as the program-wide ones, we've got like a couple of examples, or one example and 2 in the community strengthening about how you could complete it. Yeah. And really, it changes about just, drawing everything together. So it's sort of bringing the whole, that's why we say to do it last, because it's kind of like, now we've got, this is what the situation is. This is the evidence that we have for how we're going to deliver our activities. These are the activities we're delivering. These are the outcomes we're going to achieve. And then it's kind of like how we'll bring it all together. Yeah, into just a logical statement.
Yeah, thanks, Corinne. And I think it's probably just helpful to acknowledge, if people haven't had the opportunity to look into those templates as well, there are some examples there which probably would be helpful. And I note, that there is an opportunity some of you have commented on about a future workshop. I'm curious to know, what are some challenges perhaps that's been encountered sort of navigating those program logics? And I note again, I don't want to sort of miss the opportunity to acknowledge that someone has mentioned perhaps a bit of a challenge in that CPO side of things, and I think that's a conversation that probably needs to happen sort of based on that individual relationship and that scenario. But certainly if there are sort of challenges that need to be discussed in further detail, that there'll be avenues to sort of explore that. We certainly be open to sort of hearing from an example where perhaps that hasn't worked for your organization, or where perhaps sort of more generalized changes to either the template or the support provided to use an organization might help with working past those roadblocks. Finding relevant data. There's a lot of research to work through, and I think we did that question 2 slides ago about the opportunities that exist for data, and there are lots, so that can be overwhelming too, having lots of sources. And I think that's also the benefit perhaps of that program logic that evidence portal, DCJ's evidence portal, just because that is just one centralized place where you can get some of the evidence without necessarily needing to delve further if that's not a need for your organization. Formatting, that's come up. It'd be good to, it doesn't have to be in this forum as well, but if you've got specific examples of where the formatting isn't working for you, feel free to send that through to us and we can sort of have a look at it. Time constraints. And knowing that you're on the right track, I think that's been mentioned as well.
So just in terms of the formatting, we have recently, because a couple of people, obviously there's a new template, so have made an update recently because someone told us that the theory of change section couldn't be edited, so we have changed that. So if you get the most recent versions, you should be able to edit that. The other thing in terms of CPO's expectations, uncertainty on the right track, well, I guess the sort of, if the E module kind of outlines the requirements, expectations, and what we're hoping to see in there. The other thing we're going to be updating is the guide to assessing program logic. So you know, that kind of rule set out. We have one at the moment, which is for the old program logics, why, you know, sort of what sort of things we're looking for in the program logics, whether they, you know, be things that you can do to improve them, or, you know, whether they're great examples. So we're updating that, which is like a conversation guide then between CPOs and providers when they're doing their annual reviews or when they're submitting their program logics. It will have some pointers about, you know, what the expectations are in there and what things should be included, or and whether they have been or not. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks for that clarification. I will just move on to our last bit before we get on to the next presentation, just in the interest of time. What are perhaps just sort of thinking about this, the nature of this process, what are perhaps some opportunities in developing a program logic, or understanding, having opportunity to review your program logics? What are the opportunities that exist, or strengths that exist perhaps in this process that you see trying to be a bit of a parallel process and being strengths-based with our sector as well? So just that opportunity sort of, yeah, think about what are some of the benefits perhaps that might exist in this process for your service or your organization. So I can see a couple that have come up already. Yeah, it's the opportunity to find new data, and hopefully for some of you seeing that slide, you've become aware of a couple more information sources. Even if they don't get used in your program logics, perhaps they're things that you can explore just in terms of your service delivery and in your practice models. Yep, changing of needs of the community, involving your team, keeping goals in sight, strategic direction, thinking about how you use client voice, which is so important. And yeah, making future services more responsive to new emerging needs. So yeah, all things that I think would make everyone here on screen pretty happy to read. Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is a really good reflection of just how strengths-based our sector can be as well. I know there's been definitely challenges for some of you along this way, and it you know, I can recognize that, you know, from that previous slide, that it has been a journey that's not always been straightforward for some of you, but certainly also really respect the fact that, yeah, you know, there's acknowledgement here of the opportunity that exists and the value that can come out of, yeah, participating in the process as well. So thank you for sharing that. If you're feeling ready, Amanda, I'm happy to sort of hand over for the next bit of the presentation.
Sorry, everyone, bear with me while I get everything set up. One moment. Okay, great. Can everyone see my screen? Yes, okay, great. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Amanda Jones. I'm the acting co-manager of the Evidence and Strategy team. It's nice to meet you. I'd also like to start by acknowledging country. I'm coming to you from the lands of the Baramatical people, and I'd like to pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that same respect to any Aboriginal people participating today. So I'm going to take you through some of the key information that you need to know if you are going to be delivering a parenting program or supported play group in the new community and family support program. So this slide really just takes you through some of the key messages that are important to know. The first one is it's not mandatory for service providers to deliver a parenting program from the evidence-informed list or a supported play group from the evidence scan. And I start with this as the key message because we still are hearing some confusion where people come to us and say, oh, we have to deliver from that list and there's no other options. That was the initial approach, but when we were doing our consultations about the program specifications, we heard from a lot of you that not every program on that list is necessarily best suited for your local context, or you might have developed a really wonderful program that's not on that list. So we want to encourage local innovation and evidence-informed approach. So we heard that feedback and we've modified our approach. So now providers have the opportunity to deliver a parenting program or supported play group from our list, or If they're not the most suitable for your local context, you can deliver a locally applied program or model, and there's a simple process to follow. So when I talk about locally applied program or model, I'm referring to anything that is not on our evidence informed list or the evidence scan. So basically, it could be other manualized programs, it could be a locally developed program, it could be a manualized program that has been adapted or modified to suit your local needs. So really, basically everything that's not on our list. When I talk about a simple process to follow, I'm going to take you through that a bit more in the subsequent slides, but essentially we've developed a form that providers can complete where they put some information about the program that they want to deliver and the evidence informing why it will be the impact that it will have. So in terms of when you need to submit this form, the catalyst for that will be when you've been invited to negotiate a contract for a CFS program and you know that you're going to be delivering a parenting program or supported play group. It's from that point onwards that you should complete this form if you're not going to be delivering one of the programs on our list or our evidence scan. By all means, have a look at the resources available now and start thinking about it and considering what you might want to deliver, but you don't actually start that process until that has happened. Now, there is an exception to everything I've just said, and that's if you're an ALCO or a non-ALCO delivering, or sorry, an ALCO or non-ALCO with Aboriginal employees delivering either an Indigenous parenting program or an Indigenous supported play group. If you fit under that category, you're exempt from this process, and you're encouraged to design a program based off of your own community feedback, your own knowledge, and also you can have regards to, or you can have look at our Aboriginal-led early supports evidence review for guidance as well. Now, you are exempt from this, but we have heard from some people that they really want to build the evidence base for what's working in Aboriginal communities. So what we've done is we've developed a specific form that people in this category can submit. It's not to be assessed, it's just purely to help build the evidence base of what's working in Aboriginal communities. So this is an optional form that can be completed, and I'll take you through that in the subsequent slides. And one other point I really wanted to make is that if you do put in a form for a locally applied model and it's approved and you deliver that program for a while, but then you decide for whatever reason you want to stop and you want to deliver something else and then you want to start it back up again, you do not need to resubmit a form again. This is a question that I've heard several times. As long as nothing has changed about what you're delivering and the program remains the same, you can just continue with that. So this is the flow chart. This is also available on our website, and this is just really describing what I've just said to you, but it's a visual mapping of the whole process because we know some people are visual learners and this will be more helpful. So again, just taking you through the process, you can see at the top of the screen, service providers commence negotiations to deliver a parenting program or supported play group under the CFS program. So that's the catalyst for when you start thinking about what program you want to deliver and going through this whole process. So the first question that needs to be asked is, are you going to be contracted to deliver an Indigenous parenting program or an Indigenous supported play group? And if so, are you an ALCO or non-ALCO with Aboriginal employees delivering this service type? If the answer is yes, again, you're exempt from this process and you don't need to select one of the evidence-informed models or go through the process of applying to deliver a locally applied program or model. But again, you'll see on the right-hand side, there's that option to still submit that form so that we can understand what's being delivered and help build the evidence base. But no further assessment will be undertaken. So if you don't fit under that category, that takes you to the next step, which is, have you considered or selected an evidence-informed parenting program or supported play group from our list or scan? If you have, no further action is required. If you haven't, then you need to go through the process and complete that form to deliver a locally applied program or model. You submit that to your CPO, who will then submit it to the central program area for assessment. And the process isn't meant to be overly punitive. It's not as if we'll see it and we'll say automatically, no, there's not evidence underpinning it. It will be more of a iterative process where we'll go back to the CPO and we'll say maybe the service provider could address a few more points or provide some more information about this that we could consider. And then it's up to the provider whether or not they want to do that. And if so, it will go through that process again for assessment. So this just maps out the process and you can find it on our website. This is an example of the locally applied form that you would have to complete, or the form you'd complete if you want to deliver a locally applied parenting program. So this is an example of what you would put into the form. So we have two of these on the website. There's the blank template and then there's the complete template. And this actually came about due to a great suggestion we got from Lisa from FAMS, who suggested that'd be really helpful if we completed a template to sort of show the level of detail we were looking for. So that was the catalyst for this document becoming available. So you can just see here, we've used Circle of Security and Bringing Up Great Kids because we heard a lot of feedback from providers that whilst it didn't make it onto our list of evidence-informed programs, it's still a really helpful program that a lot of providers are seeing good outcomes for. So we thought it would be helpful to use these programs as an example. So you can just see here, there's some basic contact details at the top that people need to complete. Then there's some questions about what the program is and what you're looking to deliver. Who's the target group you're trying to help with this program, the locations that it's going to be delivered in, and that might be multiple ones depending on how big your organization is, what needs you're trying to address, the delivery format, how long you've been delivering the program, the service, what is the service delivery dosage like, the duration. And then you can see there's some more information asking about the evidence underpinning it, and we've included some of that into the section. But of course, you're able to add additional information as well that you might have heard. For an example, if you're already delivering that program and you're getting good results, you could add in your score data, or you could add in client feedback that you've heard. It's really quite open to you adding any kind of evidence that you might be aware of. And then, of course, we have a question about, would you be open to your program being evaluated? So again, that's about us understanding what's being delivered and looking at opportunities to build a local evidence base. So the supported playgroup form, this one is not the completed template because there's a lot of information and it wouldn't fit onto one slide, but it is available on the website if you want to look at it. And it's really essentially very similar to the parenting program one. There's just a few more pieces of information around that are more specific to supported playgroups. So for an example, we have, you'll see here, some information about the early years learning framework and the best practice principles. So it's substantially similar, but there's those few extra details that you'll need to complete. And here's an example of the Indigenous parenting program and Indigenous supported playgroup forms. So again, it's a similar form, but slightly modified. And this is open to those providers who are ALCOs or non-ALCOs with Aboriginal employees delivering Indigenous parenting programs or Indigenous supported playgroups. And it's purely just to build the evidence base of what's being delivered. It's not going to be assessed. And it's just to help us out to understand what's being delivered. So we have a few scenarios, just practical examples that we thought would be maybe helpful to contextualize the information that I've just gone over. So here you'll see scenario 1. Provider X wants to deliver a locally applied parenting program to clients. Can they do this? So the answer is yes, in principle, they can deliver the program provided they discuss this with their CPO and complete the application form to deliver a locally applied program. So when it's submitted, we'll consider, has the provider received a letter to negotiate a contract to start off the assessment process? Does the program that's being proposed align with a parenting program or a supported playgroup, or is it perhaps more aligned with another service type, in which case, further discussions will need to be had between the provider and the CPO about, is this actually the right service type to be delivering? We'll also look at, has the provider considered the list of evidence-informed programs? And is there any other evidence to support why it's more appropriate not to deliver one of those programs? And we'll look at, is the provider an ALCO or a non-ALCO with Aboriginal staff delivering services to Aboriginal people? In which case, again, there's no need to complete the form. And if the form is required, have all the fields that are relevant being completed. So the second scenario is a service provider wants to deliver an adapted version of one of the evidence-informed supported playgroup models so it's suitable for their local called community. Can they do this? And the answer is yes, in principle, they can. Some considerations are check whether the proposed model aligns with the supported playgroup service type definition, or if it's, again, more aligned with another service type. So making sure that this is the most appropriate service type. And again, the service provider should consider any licensing arrangements of the model proposed to ensure there's no restrictions around modifying the content. And of course, all fields need to be completed in the form, including the reasons why it's been chosen rather than the models identified in the scan and any supporting evidence available. Scenario 3 is a service provider has been approved by Central Program Area to deliver Circle of Security parenting program. A second service provider also wants to deliver Circle of Security. Are they automatically approved to deliver the program? The answer is no. Approval of a locally applied model or program for one service provider does not necessarily mean that that's going to be approved for a second provider. A separate form will need to be completed and submitted by another service provider who wants to deliver the same program. And the reason behind that is because we just want to understand what are the circumstances around why you want to deliver that program. And obviously every local context may be a bit different. So that's why we have a different process for each provider. Scenario 4, a non-ALCO with Aboriginal staff is delivering an Indigenous parenting program service type. What process do they need to follow? So again, getting back to that point I mentioned, if you're an ALCO or a non-ALCO with Aboriginal staff delivering an Indigenous parenting program or Indigenous supported playgroup, you're exempt from that whole process. But you do have the option to complete an Indigenous parenting program template, which provides information about the service you're going to be delivering to help build the evidence base for local Aboriginal-led programs, but this is optional. So I just want to conclude with showing where you can access all the resources that I've discussed today. So you can see here on the DCJ website, there's a tile dedicated to parenting programs and supported playgroups. And this will have all the information that I've gone over today. So it will have links to the list of evidence-informed parenting programs, our evidence scan on supported playgroups, the forms, if you want to deliver a locally applied model, the completed form to show you the example of the kind of information we're looking for, and the flow chart that outlines the process. So have a look if you haven't already had a chance. And that's it from me. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. 1 second. Sorry, I'm used to using Teams, so I'm not very great with Zoom.
Do you want to overshare, Daniel, to take over?
Oh, there it is. Got it. Thank you. Any questions?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Corinne and Amanda, for the presentations. I'm hoping that you've now got some more knowledge in this space, and we will check in. So hang around to the end. We're doing a Menti to check in to see whether you actually have learned anything today. Just only open questions from the floor for what's been been talked about so far. I do have a question that was in the chat. Jo, would you like to ask a question?
Oh, yeah, I would actually. How long will it take to get a response? Because it's going to be very hard to negotiate numbers if we don't know what we're agreeing to or what programs we can and can't run. So I'm just wondering what that kind of time frame is going to look like.
That's a really fair point, Jo. And we definitely don't want anyone to be inconvenienced because we know, of course, you're under time constraints. So Generally, we say it will take around 1 to 2 weeks for a response. However, if there is an urgent need for a response to be received sooner than that, we recommend that you discuss that with your CPO, and the CPO flags that with us so we can prioritize it. We definitely don't want to hold up the process for anyone. We want to make it as streamlined and easy as possible.
Great, that's excellent. It's a response I wanted, so thanks.
I'm glad we can help.
Great. Are there any more questions? I have some from the chat that kind of relate to the specs overall. So it's a question around the target numbers built into the current contracts and shifting to the new ones. So how will the numbers be determined? Will it be the current numbers, or are they going to look at potentially reducing some numbers depending on the services in the contract and resources available?
Thanks, Lisa. So the target numbers, I guess it's really going to be quite individual depending on each provider and what they're negotiating. One of the key messages, which I think Anthony has really tried to emphasize in the past, as well as everyone else in the program, is that we want your service to be sustainable. So we want you to really be very intentional about the number of clients that you have the capacity to work with when considering all the other costs to operate your service model. So really having to think about that and being clear during contract negotiations. If you have a lot of high numbers now, but you don't think it's sustainable with the funding that you're getting, because we hear from you that cost of service delivery is going up. Those are points that should really be discussed when you're negotiating a contract.
Yeah, thanks. And I guess I would just do a plug for DEX as well. Use your DEX as your evidence of your capacity, looking at how many service engagements you're actually having with those KPI numbers of client count. Any more? There's one more question around the DEX and score requirements. So would that be changing or the same percentages?
We're currently finalizing our reporting guide, and that will hopefully come out soon with some further guidance.
Just wait a few moments for any more questions from the room. Put your hand up. Oh, we've got a question here. Thank you. So do we need to complete the forms for parenting programs before negotiation? If you don't get approved, no.
You
Very
don't
simple.
need to. You, of course, can have a think about it, and on your own end, if you want to go through that process, of course you can, but you wouldn't actually submit it until you're going through contract negotiations and it's being discussed that you're going to be, DCJ is wanting you to deliver a parenting program or supported play group. Once that has happened, that's when you officially complete the form and submit it to your CPO. But of course you can do it before that if you want, for your own planning process, but you wouldn't actually complete it and submit it until that has happened.
And also just to note too, I know from the specs I've seen across the state is that some people have parenting programs sitting in education and skills as a service type. So there may be some negotiation around if you're not doing parenting programs, transfer it across to education and skills or vice versa.
Yeah, that's a great point, Lisa, that you bring up. And that's really linked to sort of what I was trying to get across when I was talking about going through the assessment of the form, is that sometimes people think that what they're delivering is a parenting program or supported play group, but actually it might align with another service type, or it might just be more applicable with another service type. So that is something to consider. Yes.
Thanks, Amanda, for clarifying. And Roger, you have your hand up. Nice to see you.
Hi, how are you going? Look, just a question. What we're finding is that a lot of parents are telling us about what they want in parenting groups and how they want it. How much weight does that have in making a determination about the design of groups and so forth?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something we want to hear and consider. I think you would want to put that, but also maybe some other information about why you've developed that program and any other evidence around why you think it's going to be achieving good outcomes. Obviously, parents might want something, but we also want to understand what evidence there is to support that it is going to achieve an outcome. So definitely include that information. It is relevant, especially if what they want and need isn't addressed by one of the evidence-informed models on our list. But I would recommend adding some other information as well to support the
Roger, I imagine you're probably doing a client survey for getting that data, so I would utilize that as part of the template to make it really clear.
Yep, great suggestion, Lisa.
Okay, next question is, do we need to complete the forms for parenting programs? Oh, no, sorry, next question after that.
Yeah.
Same question twice. We have a technical glitch.
Put it in twice. There's a question on the chat as well.
Oh, chat. So
Just for the contract.
yeah, from Margaret, if we're going to get a contract offer, oh, okay, no, that's about the from Margaret. So we get the contract offer. Is it being sent by email? Would that be correct?
So you're talking about
The new offer.
the new offer.
Yeah.
Anthony, I don't know if you want to jump in about.
Are you referring to when we notify providers that whether they'll be invited to negotiate a new contract? If that's what that question's about, yes, there'll be an email to the organisational contract. Sorry, the organisational contact on your contract.
Okay, thanks, Anthony. If you can clarify.
There was.
So the other.
Oh, sorry, Leslie, you go.
No, you go. I defer to you.
That's okay.
You're on mute.
There was a question in the chat from Corinne around circle of security.
Yes. Yes, you do need to complete it. Yeah, I'm using the template as the example that has circle of security in it.
Yes, use that example, but also, we encourage you to adapt that as well. Like that's just an example we've completed to try to help out. But if you have other information, add that in too, please.
Sorry, there was another question sitting there. It was the first question, actually. It was about their planning already doing their priority programs for next year. So they're looking at the local need and the delay negotiations, maybe putting huge pressure on the organisation. So would the assumption be that they would just continue to make their planning process and then wait for the negotiation, but make that planning now? With the assumption that they would get permission to use that?
Yeah, I read this sort of more as a comment than a question.
Okay.
And yeah, I agree. I empathize and understand that it is putting pressure on orgs. And that is definitely acknowledged.
Okay.
I guess yeah, as we sort of discussed a bit before, have a look at those resources ahead of contract negotiation and think about, like, is there a program on the list that is suitable in my local context that I'd want to deliver? And if not, what kind of information do I need to consider putting in the form? So hopefully that when the negotiation process does start, you'll have already gone through that thought process and have that information completed, and that will hopefully speed things up. But I do acknowledge that pressure on service providers.
Thanks, Amanda. Just might wait another moment to see if there's another question coming through. Cool. Oh. Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay. How does DCJ decide who to send the letter of offer to? That's going to be the contracting portal, everyone. Whoever's got the details of the contract portal. So it could be the CEO, the manager, or the chairperson. It just depends on what's in the system.
So I might just
clarify. Yeah, Anthony, yes.
The letter will go to the organisational level contact on your contract. Yeah.
Yeah, from the portal, yes.
No, it won't come from the portal. It'll come from the TI mailbox.
Sorry, mailbox. Sorry, yes. Do community playgroups need to submit a local model form, or it's only the supportive playgroups? So you can confirm that for us, Amanda.
Community playgroups do not need to submit a form for a locally applied program, and that is because community playgroups are a different service type than supported playgroup models. So no.
Great, thanks for confirming. But on that note, I think we might actually close. Go get yourself a cup of tea, everybody. Thank you for your time today. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you.